2019 is going to be a big year for Nintendo. It's going to be pretty huge. I haven't wrote a script in a while, cut me some slack. I talked about 2019 a while ago in relation to the other years the Switch has had so far, and while I'm not sure it'll have any groundbreaking games, I do think it'll have a bunch of good ones. Those games in question include the next main Pokemon game, Luigi's Mansion 3, Yoshi's Crafted World, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Animal Crossing Switch, and that town game. I'll be honest, I totally just copy-pasted that from the other script. I just keep getting more and more lazy. But with all those, 8 out of 10 games coming, which ones will rise above the rest and be the best of the year? Hello all 618 of you, I'm Redkwan, and I probably just lost any Animal Crossing fans watching. Shoot. Also, what 2019 game will be the best? That's the main one. So let's take a look at each of these games. First up, we've got Animal Crossing Switch, trying to salvage any stragglers from my 8 out of 10 line. Animal Crossing is a very consistent series. Every game so far has been really solid, and there's a big fan base who really loves them. And in the past, they've also been pretty predictable, with each new game being only slightly different from the last. If Animal Crossing Switch stuck with this pattern, which it might, I feel like it would be a great game, but I probably wouldn't make it my number one for the year. But I kind of feel like Nintendo might change it up more than they have in the past. I'm sure I'll end up talking about it in another video at some point, but I think Animal Crossing has the real potential to shake some things up. Looking back on the Switch, Nintendo's biggest series have, for the most part, been reimagined or expanded. Breath of the Wild was a big new way to do Zelda, and Mario Odyssey was a huge Mario game too. Some people would say Super Smash Bros. Ultimate falls into that category because, look Redkwan, everyone is here or something, and while there is more in the game, it's not really in a way that changes the base gameplay. But that's not the point. The point is that Animal Crossing is one of Nintendo's biggest series, and based on their reveal trailer, really playing it up as a big deal, I could definitely see some big changes. If Nintendo made an Animal Crossing game that was able to realize the potential the series has, I think it would probably be the highlight of the year, but it's still sort of up in the air as to if it'll really make that difference, seeing as Nintendo likes to keep a lot of their lighter, simpler games pretty consistent. But what about Pokemon? I feel like it's kind of in the same boat. The first main series Pokemon game on a powerful home console could be something really incredible, but Pokemon games are so unchanging that I have a hard time believing it'll really be anything too much different. It honestly bums me out a little bit to think that there probably won't be much more than a typical Pokemon game on the Switch. The original Pokemons were totally built the way they were because they were limited by the technology of the time, and I think they feel like they've been limited for so long that they've convinced themselves that the way they make Pokemon is the way they want to make Pokemon, not because of limitation, but because that's the hip and trendy way to do things. Well, let me tell you, Pokemon, it sure stinkin' isn't, and I really don't think the Let's Go games were really a step in a new direction. If I saw screenshots from the game, I don't even know if I would have noticed it wasn't a 3DS game at first. Maybe that's just because I'm dumb, but what I'm trying to say is this. Pokemon can be so much more than it is, and I doubt it ever will be, because they want to put these games out every year, and they're completely fine putting out games that are really similar time after time. So can Pokemon be the best game of the year? Totally. I think if they really tried to do something new, they could do something incredible, but I just don't see that change happening. And while I think it will still be a good game and probably the most popular of the year, it won't be the best. What about Luigi's Mansion 3? We haven't had a new Luigi's Mansion game in a good long while, and the games in the past have both turned out pretty well. But the problem I see with this game, in terms of it being the best game, is that it doesn't really look too much different than its predecessors. Honestly, I can probably say that for Yoshi too. Neither looks bad, but neither looks like something that will really blow people away. They don't really look like best Nintendo Game of the Year type of games. Maybe Yoshi and Luigi will really come through, but I don't see either of these games being the best of the year. Two other games I mentioned were Fire Emblem and Town. Fire Emblem games usually get reviewed really well, which I find to be a little strange. But hey, I'm not a professional reviewer. I'm not really a professional anything, come to think of it. Fire Emblem also has quite the massive cult following, which, even though it contradicts itself, is a pretty accurate way to describe it, and I'm sure there will be a lot of excitement for this new game. The question then becomes, how good will it be? The heart of the gameplay honestly looks pretty similar to what it's always been, but it also looks like the character has a lot of freedom of movement throughout an overworld, which depending on how much it's used, could end up being a really good aspect. Being a pretty traditional RPG, I'd be surprised if it was too big a part of the game seeing as they probably are going to focus on battling and talking your ear off for 10-minute stretches, but they could surprise me. I see it being a really good game, but unless it adds a lot to the overworld, I don't think it'll propel itself to that level. And Town. It's kind of the odd man out on this list, but you know what? I think it looks interesting, and this list doesn't really matter at all. Town looks like it has an interesting world, a mysterious story, and some fun. It's hard to think of 3 things from a 40-second trailer, okay? The only thing that kinda disappoints me about all this, like apparently a lot of games coming next year, is that it's a turn-based RPG, which just isn't really a very interesting system to me anymore because we see so many games use it. Nothing against turn-based RPGs, but being that type of game makes it a little hard for me to see it being a really fantastic game. Maybe you really like turn-based RPGs, but I think that if that's what the main gameplay is, it just isn't enough to make it great. Like Fire Emblem, Town probably has more to it than just the RPG stuff, based on the town itself seeming to have a neat story attached to it. And I do like the concept of a whole game taking place in one smallish location you explore throughout the playthrough. But like Fire Emblem, unless the other aspects are really stellar, I don't see it taking the #1 spot for the year. So after all that, let's bring it back together. I didn't plan on this, but the games all ended up going into 3 categories. Animal Crossing and Pokemon were games that had the potential to be incredible, but are series that tended to play it safe. Luigi's Mansion and Yoshi were games that are almost guaranteed to be really solid, but that we also have a pretty good idea of what they'll be, and they probably aren't going to be the biggest games of 2019. And Fire Emblem and Town look interesting, and how they turn out depends on how unique and interesting the other aspects of the game are as to how good they'll actually be. Now it may sound like it's all up in the air based on all these different factors, but luckily for you, I can always be counted on to pull out some unfounded speculation. Like I said, I think the Yoshi and Luigi's Mansion will be good, but I don't really think they're in the running, and the other 4 are where it gets a little bit more interesting. When I look at everything though, I have a hard time seeing it be anything other than Animal Crossing. Feel free to call out my anti-turn-based RPG bias that I was talking about literally minutes ago. You might be right that that's what it is, but I don't think there's much of a chance of any of these games doing anything that's unique or mind-blowing. To be fair, I'm not sure Animal Crossing will either, but I think it has the best chance to. And even if it isn't to a huge extent, I think based on Nintendo building it up in the reveal trailer, that it'll at least have some new and exciting stuff. Maybe one of these games will really break my expectations, and then that might end up taking the spot. And I do think that all these games will end up being good, but if I were to guess, I think Animal Crossing Switch will be the best game of 2019. Well, I'm Redkwan. What do you think the best game of next year will be? Did I make this video too long? Probably. I didn't really realize how long I made it. Anyways, I'm Redkwan, thank you all for watching, and I'll hopefully see you all later. Goodbye.